Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, January 22nd, 2024, and this is episode 851 of Living Free in Tennessee. And it is a Monday show. So, what we're going to do is talk about a big picture topic, but also we have our usual Monday segments. And today, you may have noticed this. We've had some pretty kick-ass episodes this year. And that's because after really honing down in on my word of the year, which is hone, oddly enough, it's like I say it every other word now. I realized that part of why you listen to Living Free in Tennessee is this. And it's what we used to do a lot more. And we walked away from that a bit as I've been down the road of building my businesses, expanding the community because the community is badass. And I separated homesteading from this because it used to be once a week and now we have multiple times a week. So I decided coming into the new year to do more of these just hit it hard episodes on Monday. And that's sort of the focus of Monday. So I hope you enjoy today's topic, which is take that risk and make it work. Because if you look at what's happened here at Living Free in Tennessee, everything that's gone well for me in building a business has started with step one. That's deciding to take the risk. So we're going to talk about that today. But I'm also going to talk about our normal Monday segments. And those of you in the live stream, I have something to say. If you put your question in all caps today, I'm not going to notice because this is a pre-recorded video. I am out of town dedicating time to something that's really important to me. It's the My Three Things book. And I've written the book, but I'm working on the marketing plan this week in isolation, along with re-editing the book because it will come out in May. I'm planning to launch it in May. If you come to the Living Free in Tennessee Spring Workshop, which is April 25th to 27th, I am giving out, everybody who comes to that gets a pre-publication or pre-launch copy of the book, which is kind of cool. But I'm really excited about that. And I've decided to try out this whole StreamYard live stream when you're not live thing. So if you have questions about this episode, email them to me, Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com. That's Nicole@livingfreeintennessee.com. I want to talk next about our featured event of today's show, and that is a beekeeping basics course that you can take Saturday, January 27th. It's in Strawberry Plains, Tennessee, and I have a link in the show notes. But I just put out on our network, hey, who has something that they can share with the network? Because I often I'm like, hey, get your tickets to LFTN. Hey, get your tickets to SRF. No, go to stuff in your community too. And I think this is a great time of year to learn the basics of beekeeping because you still have time to get your nukes and to get your hive started when spring comes so that you hopefully have a hive built big enough to have a set of bees that overwinter. I wonder how my bees are going to do this winter. My bees that aren't my bees anymore. Anyway, my bee mentor has adopted my bees because I became allergic to being stung and decided I didn't want to have the hives like right there of the world's bitchiest bees because my bees were pretty grumpy. And every time they had something to protect, which is to say, queen making season or when they felt like it was getting cold and they needed to protect their honey, they would sting. And then that, for me, anaphylaxis follows now. So that's not good to have around. We do have honeybees all over the property. I'm not worried about them. The ones that come from off the property, it was more having their home right there in my backyard was not working for me, but it could work for you. And it's very fulfilling to have bees. I, in fact, totally took on a fear of bees and being stung as part of my reason for getting the bees to begin with. So that was kind of cool. Anyway, Beekeeping Basics, Saturday, January 27th at the War Room, Strawberry Plains, Tennessee. And the link in the show notes will take you to the Facebook event so you can get more information. It's an open event. I also want to thank our two sponsors of today's show. Sponsor number one is John Pagliano of the Wealthsteading podcast, which is a great thing to listen to. In fact, I'm sure I was listening to episodes of that on the plane on the way to where I'm going on Monday. So he has really accessible episodes that just talk about how he's investing, how he's making decisions, how he's taking into account world events, and how that invests his decisions to take money and grow money into more money. I think it's a great thing to listen to, even if you're not ready to invest it yet, just check it out on any podcatcher. It's called the Wealth Setting Podcast, like homesteading, wealth setting, homesteading. Those two things kind of mesh. He's a homesteader himself, which is kind of cool, which is how he kind of brings that proper mindset, I would say, into investing for our network. If you need to go to the website, it's investablewealth.com. Just click on podcast on his top navigation. It'll take you right there. Our second sponsor of today's show is Homestead Apprentice. Have you heard about this? If you've been listening to my Tuesday lives, you know that SOE and a couple of people are putting together a really cool show called Homestead Apprentice, where they give people the opportunity to come, and it's basically like a boot camp for homesteaders or aspiring homesteaders. And at the end of it, because you can be kicked out, like they vote on who keeps going and how they're doing on the projects. I don't know if they actually kick people out or fire people, apprentice style, but I do know this. One person, if they successfully complete everything, is going to get a piece of land to build their homestead on. So if you're listening to this going, man, I really wish I could have a homestead, but I just can't get the land. I can't afford the land. Get your application in at homesteadapprentice.com. They have you make a video about why you want to do it and some of the background about who you are. They have you fill out a couple of really simple questions and put a referral in there. It's a very simple application. They will be using the video for promotions between now and then. And you don't have to get toolbox fallacy of making that video. Like literally set up your phone, make the video, send it in. What is keeping you from getting your homestead if that's what you really want? This is an opportunity to do that. That's homesteadapprentice.com. Okay. Mondays always feel like a camp when it's like announcements. Remember the million Satoshi giveaway? I have a huge confession to make. I got that launched in September because we went past 1 million downloads in September last year, and I put aside 1 million Satoshis to give away. And I asked people to fill out a form and tell me what episodes you love. And then we kind of lost momentum. And here's what happened. Somebody in my family, it was like I'd already had 2 deaths in the family. Somebody in my family got terminally ill who's pretty close to me. And I was on the road visiting them, and I ended up basically totally dropping the ball on that. So we're starting this again. If you would like to get involved in the drawing for the 1 million Satoshis, all you got to do is fill out the form. There's a link in the show notes, livingfreeintennessee.com. Just go there and type 1 million or just the word million. It'll take you straight to that post, or there's a link in the livingfreeintennessee.com on the right-hand side. There's a link to it. Fill out that form. You tell me what episode was your favorite, and then that gets you entered in. Everybody who's already sent in episodes and you're hearing this, you get double entries for yours because you waited and you got them in like the first time I ever mentioned it. So today I want to highlight an episode that was submitted by a listener, and it is it's called 3D Printing with Brad and Leslie Ferrier. And I have a link to that in the show notes. And we did this in 2020. It was in December of 2020. We interviewed them about building 3D printers into your life, how you can build a business with it. They are local to Tennessee. So if you will connect with other 3D printers in Tennessee, in fact, I don't know why they haven't applied to come speak at Self-Reliance Festival. But anyway, that's the episode that we're highlighting that is just somebody's favorite. And the link to that is in the show notes. If you want to do a flashback, just like check it out. It's 3D printing with Brad and Leslie Ferrier. So get those in, guys, and we'll be doing the drawing probably towards the end of February. Our live stream schedule this week is this video, which is my first experiment doing a video that's live but not live, where I pre-record it, but we play it at our usual time. So that this is playing Monday at 2 p.m. Tuesday at 12:30, I will be live from an undisclosed location with Nick Ferguson and John Willis for our Tuesday live. And then Friday at 9:30 a.m., we will have our usual homestead happenings with the Tactical Redneck. You may notice we don't have a Wednesday interview this week. It's because I'm on the road. And every time I do this, which is once a month, we don't have a Wednesday interview because I'm in the air on Wednesday coming home. I figured out I can leave like Monday to Wednesday, and I get coffee orders out, have a break, and can still get coffee orders out in a reasonable amount of time. So that's how I've worked out to work this in, by honing my focus on my schedule, right? Okay, we're ready for the first segment of today's show, and that's Tales from the Prepper Pantry, where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. And this really helped me in 2020 when there was supply chain disruption, and 2021 when there was chain disruption. But this year, I was asked to do a pantry challenge by Don Gorham, and that was January, no going to the store, no going to restaurants. You can source like your usual subscriptions. Like I have a milk subscription, I can keep that. You can source directly from a farm right now, but just see to the best of your ability what holes you have in your pantry. And I rather like this challenge for two reasons. One, we're not in a crisis. So I can still go to the store if something epic is not there and I need it, right? It's like it's a challenge, but if I don't do the challenge, it's okay if I fail. That's cool because it does open your eyes into things that you wish you might be stocking differently. And truth be told, in pantry management, there are things that just don't store well, like lettuce. That if you're going to have a recurring supply in your life, you either need to have a relationship with somebody who can do that for you, a farmer. You need to do it yourself, or you need to just acknowledge if the grocery store has supply chain problems. One of the first things to go out is lettuce, guys. It's fresh lettuce. I'm just going to be without fresh lettuce, so that I'll just accept that. Those are all reasonable solutions to that issue, but at least you know that that's coming. And some really cool things you can do to hedge against that is learn about wild edibles and what sorts of greens you can source just by going into the woods at different times of year. So you can actually kind of cover that with watercress and other things, dandelion greens, those sorts of things, which I think is a really cool skill just to learn for fun. But it's also beneficial. I think it's beneficial health-wise because, that's stuff growing as it should grow. And my suspicion that is unverified by any research, because I haven't done any research, there might be research out there, is that we get a better nutrition balance when we have a variety of things in our diet versus just, the same anemic lettuce from the store all the time. So we are almost through with it. It was the month of January. I decided to do this pantry challenge without restocking. So a lot of people kind of in December were getting ready for the pantry challenge. I decided I'm not going to get ready for it. I'm just going to see where I'm at, except for one thing that I know. And the one thing that I knew was that I did not stock 110 pounds of onions for the winter, which I usually do. And I went out and bought some onions because I just like onions. And so I did go into this month with 2 little bags, like 5 onions each. So 10 onions to use. And then I've been looking at onion substitutes throughout the month. So one of the things I've done and I'm saying this because I already know that's a weak spot in my garden, and it's also a weak spot in my storage this year. It's not usually a weak spot in my pantry though, because I do usually store 110 pounds of onions starting in October. They last till about April in cold storage, which is my actual root cellar area. It's not a real root cellar, but it kind of works like one, so I use it that way. Anyway, I didn't do that this year because of the construction project that we had, and I allowed myself to do that. And then the other thing I am allowing myself to do is when I'm out of town, I am not bringing all my food with me on the airplane. I am actually going to go to the grocery store, and I will probably eat out 1 or 2 times. And I planned that into, I was like, what do? I don't have access to my pantry. And while I can bring everything with me this month, I don't want to have a whole carry-on dedicated to food or a checked bag or something. So that's just how I've done it. It's gone pretty well. Not surprisingly at all. Dairy is my weak spot. It's always been my weak spot. I didn't make cheese in the fall the way I usually do. I was bailed out by Dawn, who brought me 3 gallons of milk last Friday, and I made it into, I kind of decided what kind of cheese will I make. I made it into mozzarella, which can melt on things. And because it's made from raw milk, I've found mozzarella goes bad faster. So I grated some up and put it in the freezer. I keep frozen cauliflower crust pizzas for times when we're really busy, and probably the day I get back from this trip, I'll do a cauliflower crust pizza. And then I'll use that mozzarella on it because you always have to add stuff to it, like gummies from your pantry and a little extra cheese and a little homemade spaghetti sauce on there, right? That's how we do that here. So I have that set aside. And if I probably won't use all of the cheese I made, actually. I ended up with 4 good sized mozzarella balls. I cut one up yesterday for the Holler neighbor dinner, and we kind of snacked on that. It was a little undersalted. I will give that feedback. And the way that happened is I put the salt in, and you're like stretching it, and you should put salt in a second time. If you put more salt in at the beginning and don't put salt in the second time, it ends up undersalted because I think the salt falls away with the way that you're like stretching out of it. So the first ball I did salt it a second time. And so I've like put that one aside as the serve it cheese, and the rest of it's the grated and melted cheese for taco salad or pizza or what, or eggs. Like we had some in our eggs today. And I was really happy that my chickens started laying eggs again, because we've been, I was starting to hit the freeze dried eggs, which is fine. And then I also found, this is great. So I went through the freezer I have dedicated to sort of like, okay, stuff is getting to the use it up phase. I have a specific freezer where I put that, because I have 4 freezers. One is for workshop food, one is, and then the other 3 are for things that we eat here. So I keep the business food separate from the food that we're eating here. I'm sure all of that's going to change once I talk to Matthew Sursley, but that's a whole different story. But in the freezer where I usually have use it up stuff, I have like tallow and stuff to use up. So I always cook with animal fats. And I also just started pulling random stuff out. So this week I ended up with like boneless meats. So I had boneless chicken from a class demo we did when we did like, here's how you process a chicken. This is how you parts it up. This is how you debone the chicken, like all of that. And those end up in my freezer, those demo pieces. So I had that. I had rabbit, like boneless rabbit that had been cut up by AutoFab that had been in my freezer a while. I had a pork loin from our pigs, which is now 2 years in the freezer, which is really time to use that up. I also had pork tenderloin in there. And so I put all of those things together, and I cubed them up into 1-inch cubes approximately. And I sauteed them in beef tallow with garlic. And then I added an Indian curry spice and some other spices to it. Like I have freeze-dried basil from the garden and some other stuff. And I served that, and it kind of made its own broth a little bit. So it had a little bit, it kind of turned out to be a little saucy. Saucy, you get it? And it was pretty cool. It was delicious. And I ended up with a giant Dutch oven full of meat hunks. And there were a few carrots in there, and there were some green beans in there, but mostly it was meat hunks. And we had about a serving and a half left by the end of that, because the Redneck eats a lot at night. And so the next day, I had taken a cauliflower bisque that we had left over from last spring workshop, and I put that in, and then some pieces of leftover roast beef in, and then some pieces of leftover roasted chicken in, and like stirred it all up, heated it on the stove. That turned out to be an amazing stew. So we have not been suffering at all with the pantry challenge. Instead of onions, I've used green onions from the aquaponics system. And I've used a lot more like just garlic, because I have a ton of garlic, and it's not the same flavor as onion, but it's good. And then I will augment with, I do have powdered onion on hand. So that's nice to have. I wish I had freeze-dried onion, which I will fix next year. And I'm hoping that this year, I'm going to try harder in the garden to grow more onions. I have not had a lot of success with onions, and I think it's the way I'm cultivating it in the ground. I've been developing some new plots, and I keep putting onions in the new plots, and I think the onions would like my existing plots better. Same with the beets. In fact, when I put the garlic in this year, it was like amazing. It was like butter, just in, so easy, like no fighting the clay. And I have been turning clay into better garden soil since moving here. And when I ignored the garden for that few years, I ignored the garden while I was building Holler Roast Coffee up. It started returning to clay. So like just leaving it fallow was not good, and not adding organic matter to that. Okay, so we are going to be restocked. So I will confess, I have restocked pantry items that need to be restocked on the schedule that I need to do it, which means this. If I'm out of bourbon smoked paprika, I order another one. Okay. And when I go from long-term storage with the bourbon smoked paprika to the kitchen, then that's when I restock it. If I don't restock it at that time, if it's a digital restock, I forget. And so when that has happened, I've restocked and then made a mental note I'm not allowed to use that thing until February. I did that because that's my process. And if I mess up my process, it's going to be a problem. My brain doesn't work great with like the list at the end of the month. But anything I would physically go into the store to restock, I have kept in the way that I will. So basically, I'm going to be restocking toilet paper, some sauces and spices, medical supplies, onions, and cheese. And this year, going into the cheese world, I'll be more purposeful about making cheddar cheese. And I'm kind of excited, and I don't know if I'll make time for this or not, but I'm going to start making some other types of cheeses because I saw this video. I shared it out on the Living Free in Tennessee YouTube just about the role of calcium chloride in cheese, which is great. What I was looking for was how much powdered calcium chloride to water to make the calcium chloride additive when you're going to add it to your cheese, because I forgot and I didn't feel like paging through my books of notes that has that in there. And it's really hard to find that by Googling it. But this one lady made a video about that. And it was like sort of, it's like, oh, yeah, I already knew that. If I would have just thought about it for 2 seconds, you weigh it. And if you want 30%, right, you make it, that much in grams, 30% of the total, and then the rest is water, and then you mix it, and then you have a 30% solution, or 33% solution is really what you're going for. So 1/3, basically. So if you have 300 grams total, then you do 200 grams of water, 100 grams of the powdered stuff. You can buy the powdered stuff in the pickling section because it's used to keep pickles crisp. So I shared that video because I thought great job, and I am super excited about her channel, so I'll watch a few more videos on her channel, but also I'm never going to forget that again, and if I would have thought about it, it would have been fine. I am adopting something I started doing more this month is on Sunday, running to the freezer and grabbing all the things that look like they need to be eaten up, and the things that I'm least likely to cook right now are poultry-based because of my flavor change. Now, the American breast chicken that we processed this fall tastes better than the Cornish cross chickens to me. And that's notable. But I still have a bunch of Cornish cross chickens in my freezer, and I still have some hunks of turkey in my freezer. And those things just don't taste good to me. I kind of describe it as a rotten fish flavor, but it's not exactly it. That is not exactly it. I had a better analogy come across. When I think of it, I'll share it with you. But it's sort of like an off flavor for me ever since I had that, that super cold that people got that made them not smell and not taste. So what I've done with poultry is make curries out of them and other strong flavored things to hide the flavor of that, because I know it's not that the meat is bad. It is that my taste buds are messed up. And I'm hoping that as I've gotten healthier, that will change. I'm starting to wonder how much of it's an attitude problem because I'm used to it tasting off. Or how much of is it just because I've become more ketogenic over the years, and maybe physiologically because the fat balance in poultry is not right for what I'm supposed to be eating. It might just be that I like red meat better. I don't know. But that being said, the things least likely to get cooked are those. And especially if it's a really big piece, like we grew these like monstrous turkeys, and I have, half turkeys that weigh 20 pounds. And so unless I'm serving people the half turkey, there's no point in me defrosting that and doing anything with it, because I'll basically make more green curried turkey than we can eat in 2 years, because the redneck also doesn't like get all excited about poultry either. So basically what I did this month, because I was hitting the use it up freezer, is I made sure every week we had at least one poultry. And I'm going to keep doing that until we eat down the poultry, because the poultry is the thing that will end up in my freezer too long. And so that just basically means Sunday I come out and I have a bin and I'm like, chicken or turkey or whatever poultry is in there, or rabbit. And then uh, my reward is I get a brand new roast from the new cows from the other freezer. And then anything else that's there, if it's venison, if it's lamb bits, if it's whatever, I just take them. Or if it's pre-cooked things that I've frozen so that I can just easily make a meal later, I'll just grab that until the bin is full. And then I put that in my fridge to defrost. And the one thing that usually happens is Monday we end up having taco salad because that stuff isn't defrosted all the way yet to be able to cook. I mean, a lot of things you can cook from frozen, but it's just easier to manipulate it if it's not. So we have taco salad or Korean beef or meatloaf or something from ground beef because I can defrost it pretty in a day, and it's it's a quick meal. So I'm doing that still. I'll do that through February for sure, because what that has done for us is had me ahead of the game every day on meal planning, which I'm pretty good at. But some days, especially the way my schedule works now, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is like crazy race. And then Thursday, I like Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning, I finally break okay, I have time to do more household stuff. So there's a lot of focus on podcasting, coffee, and events on Monday and Tuesday in particular. It takes a lot of time. And I'm doing marketing things, like all of this. And then I've specifically designed it so it's not just Monday through Friday that way. So that there's this like Wednesday after the interview and then Thursday by about noon. That time period is time I can put into housing stuff, like getting the plants started for the garden, like homestead stuff. But also like that gives me time to think about content creation and what we want to do. And then by Thursday afternoon, I'm hitting it again. We're roasting coffee orders a second time, getting those out. And then we have homestead happenings Friday. So I end up with a lull on Sundays and a lull on Thursdays, basically, to get some of these things done. And what had been happening was by Wednesday, I was messing up meals and we were ordering out, or I was just eating too late, or doing, just like ground beef all the time, basically, because it's easier, or frozen pizza crust or whatever it is. So that's been a really good thing for me this month. I have also lost 4 pounds on the pantry challenge. So there's a lesson there too about eating out. And then, yeah, that's it. The Use It Up curry I already told you about. That soup was delicious. Next up, I want to talk about the weekly shopping report. Usually I read this here. Because it's Sunday when I'm recording this, Joe has not put his stuff out yet. So if you want to check out the weekly shopping report, go to MeWe.com, join the LFTN group over there, answer a couple of questions. The second question in your screening question, if you get it wrong, it's fine. But if you make up something so flip that it's pornographic, which somebody totally did today, I will not let you in the group, because I assume that, you might think it's funny and you might think I know who you are, but I don't know who you are. And it's not like, we don't want that in the group. So that's why those questions actually exist. Anyway, you will see the shopping report there if you check it out. And by next week, we should be back in sync with each other. I think Joe didn't go shopping last weekend, I'm guessing, because I didn't see one come out all week. And we had like Snowmageddon here, or Cold Mageddon. That's why I'm recording this in my handy dandy Duluth overalls and my base layer that's also Duluth, actually. This one's really warm. This is my super warm one that I only wear, like I've only worn it 2 days this year, and I only wore it 1 day last year. So it's going to last me a really long time. But boy, when I need it, it's great. So it was like 10 degrees this morning. It didn't get above 19. I took the dogs for a walk in this, and I did some other chores in it. Tactical did more chores than I did outside today. But this thing is awesome. I love this base layer. Okay, next up, we have the frugality tip. And this one comes from me, and it has to do with being snowed in. We were snowed in all week. The snow came Sunday, and we had a brief set of time on Wednesday where I was able to get to town to deliver coffee orders to the mailbox, because we did not see the mailman this week. And then actually, ironically, he did show up Wednesday afternoon coming the other direction up the road from how he usually comes. So I think he was thinking, well, at least I get there once this week. So I thought that was funny. I was like, well, I already delivered like 40 boxes to the post office, so you're good. Anyway, one of the things that's been really nice this week is having bone broth hot and ready to go after outside work. So in particular, when I hear that Tactical's going to the pasture, I'll put some on the wood stove or on the stove to heat up. So when he comes back, he can drink a cup of bone broth. Or if I know I'm going to go out and mess with the chickens, I'll heat it up and then I can come in and have bone broth. And it's been really warming and nourishing. And it's also been awesome because I've been making it fresh all week rather than using my canned stuff because I have a lot of bones in my freezer taking up space where I could have other things. So I've been doing sort of one pot at a time, which yields about half gallon to 3/4 of a gallon of bone broth. And then we're going through about a quart a day right now, and sometimes more, sometimes less. But one of the things that I've been really cognizant of this month, is that I don't have a lot of onions. And so as I've been cutting onions, I've been keeping the pieces I don't use that are good. Like if it has mildew or something on it, obviously not that. But I've been keeping, ends or pieces we're not going to use in cooking in my bag of bones. So I throw them in there. I've been throwing carrot peels in there and other vegetables that would taste ends and odds that would taste good in the bone broth, and then just cooking that with the bones rather than adding a standalone onion. And this allows me to stretch my onions really well. So that's my frugality tip is if you have, garlic bits or onion bits or celery or carrots or anything, parsley ends, like the stems of parsley or cilantro, anything that would be good in bone broth, you can put those in your freezer bag of bones too. And then you have delicious bone broth that's spiced basically with things that you were going to throw away or compost. That being said, if you're not already keeping your bones in a baggie in your freezer, start doing that because the bone broth that you can make homemade is about 4 million times better, at least 4 million times better. Trust me, it's 4 million times better than what you get at the store. And, learning how to do that is a great way. I mean, that's another one that busts your inflation problem. Like if you're not buying bone broth because you're making it, you're not buying the bone broth, then it doesn't matter what it costs at the store. It just takes a little bit of time and energy, and actually doesn't take that much time because you just throw it in the pot and walk away. Now, Mary would say roast the bones first so they don't taste funny or smell funny. I've done it both ways, and there is a flavor difference if you roast the bones. But if you don't have time to roast the bone, you can stand the smell while it's cooking. It actually doesn't taste bad that way either. So that's just me experimenting in the kitchen. If it is a roasted thing, I don't worry about roasting it. Like if I roast a chicken and then I do those bones, I consider those bones roasted for what that's worth. That's just how I operate with my bone broth. How do you do yours? Let me know. I'd love to hear. Okay, next segment is Operation Independence. This is where we talk about building local ongoing revenue into our lives. And I'm out this week. That is why you are getting it pre-recorded on the live. And I wanted to make sure this year. So last year, with the word hone, I decided to focus in on things that are most important. And one of the things is consistency with the podcast. So yes, I will take some vacations, and there will be some times where I don't pre-record for those vacations this year. But when I'm doing something like this, which is probably a monthly trip for the year to work on things that require uninterrupted concentration, it is important to me that you still get the content that you have come to expect. And so what I decided to do is start pre-recording things that we can stream on YouTube and other places. And then I'll cut the Wednesday show the week that I do that. But you still get your Monday, Wednesday, Friday audio podcast. Because if you're listening to the audio podcast, you're going to get pre-recorded Tuesday lives. You're going to get Bear Independent this week as your Wednesday show. But I'm doing that to further grow our network and to further grow my business by getting the My Three Things book out, which people have been asking for 3 years, and I just haven't gotten it done. And the way I'm doing it is by doing it this way, right? So as I said, the LFTN workshop attendees will get the pre-release copy of the book. I'm excited to finally get it out. I hope it changes your lives the way it changed mine. I know some of you have already used it as a successful tool in changing your lives. And I have some of your stories in the book. So that's what my Operation Independence is this week. And I'm excited about it, guys, and I'm excited about this new approach of being able to pre-record. I don't know why it didn't occur to me sooner to just record the video and schedule the video to play. Mind blown, right? Toolman Tim told me I could do that a year ago, and I just didn't figure out how to do it. The other thing is, I do listen to you when you give me feedback. And at the end of last year, I announced that the Tuesday lives are going to be cut from Living Free in Tennessee. They're going to spin off into their own podcast, which that's going to happen. But so many of you have reached out and said, I really like the Tuesday lives. The reason I was doing that is some of the Tuesday lives go way further down the panic prepper road than I am comfortable from a branding standpoint on this podcast. Unless I do like sweep up, follow up, yes, that person's scared. No, I don't think, like I think this is a better way to make decisions. So having heard you loud and clear, the Tuesday podcast will come back into our regular rotation for audio podcasts. And those of you who don't like them can skip them. And if there's one I think doesn't fit, I won't. And that other podcast will still happen because I think that podcast as a standalone podcast makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to lock in on a couple of sponsors for the Tuesday live that makes sense for it. And one of those is the Self-Reliance Festival. And the other one is Homestead Apprentice. There may be room for a third. I probably will just rotate our show sponsors in through there. But it makes sense for that to all be in a tidy package because that's something I do with John Willis at Special Operations Equipment. Self-Reliance Festival is something I do with John Willis at Special Operations Equipment. And Homestead Apprentice is a project of John Willis at Special Operations Equipment. So I think it actually works pretty well. So let me know what you think about that. But yes, the Tuesday lives are going to come back into your audio feed just because you said so. My only barrier right now is I'm going to package them in a way that doesn't have a custom introduction every time. I'm going to have sort of a boilerplate one. And then I am going to work with Letty, I think, or somebody to do the audio production so that when I'm done recording, because the way my week is scheduled is like when I'm done recording that, I run straight to another project that I'm working on. So I want to keep that and not spend an hour like promoting and producing. So I'm going to work on packaging it a little bit differently, but you won't really, you'll notice that I say the same introduction every Tuesday, but you won't really notice that, somebody else is doing it versus me doing that part of it. And I do all of my audio production. Like I do all of that. And I have it templatized in a way that I have optimized how to do it. But then that also means sometimes you hear me say, hey, we need to have a silent spot here. And I'm going to cut that out. And then you're in the audio podcast and you're like, she totally didn't cut that out. Yeah. That happened a week ago, I believe, 2 weeks ago. I was having weird internet things. So anyway, now it's time for the main topic of today's show. And that is take that risk, make it work. This one was one that when I thought about doing, I realized that I needed to go for a walk to solidify why I wanted to do it. Because if I don't know why I want to do a show, then it comes through as sort of like rambling, and that's not good. If you listen to one of my early podcasts, I said, oh, and I'm boring myself, so I must really be boring you. And somebody wrote in there like, that's the funniest thing I ever heard, Nicole. So this one comes from a place of anxiety. I want to do that. But what if when I launch it, I get so many orders I can't fulfill them? The economy is looking really sketchy. What if people can't afford my product? You ever say things like that to yourself, guys? What if I move and real estate crashes and I end up upside down in my mortgage and then I'm screwed and I can't ever move again? I'm like stuck there. What if I sell my house and it's worth 4 times as much next year and I didn't tap into its value? What if we go to war? What if the economy crashes? What if I'm not good enough? Let me say that one again. What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm not good enough? These are all things that I've heard people say to me or that I've said to myself when I was evaluating whether to take a risk and do something new. I would call friends worried about what I need to do and say, like this thing, it's unpredictable, and what if, and oh my gosh, and it all boiled down to one thing usually. It wasn't what if the economy crashes. It wasn't what if they declare martial law. It wasn't what if the monetary system falls apart and is replaced by something else and I'm left behind. It wasn't anything other than what if I'm not good enough at the core of it all. When evaluating risks, it's important to assess what the risks are. It's also important to separate the what if I'm not good enough. You know what? Sometimes you're not. Usually you are, though. And the difference between not and usually are is usually making a decision to do it. Every single thing that has moved me ahead in life, every single thing has involved taking a risk. Everything. Every business that I've had that's succeeded. Every event I've had that's sold out. Every big name speaker I've booked has involved taking at least the risk of asking them and feeling the pain of a no, or the pain of, holy cow, you charge that much. Like I had somebody who wanted $150,000 to speak at Self-Reliance Festival, and they have not spoken at Self-Reliance Festival. I was like, I'm not saying you're not worth it. I'm just saying that our festival is not there right now. Every time I've attempted to grow, I've had to take a risk. Every time I've not gone as far as I wish I had on that thing, I still took a risk. I took an action. I made a decision. And then what followed was the need to focus and work. And that following is usually the focus and the work is usually what made the difference between big success, little success, or meh. Really, nothing comes easily. It's not like, hey, I just decided to launch a podcast and I have 4 million downloads, right? Or 1 million, as the case may be. But imagine how things would be different if I had decided to do the more conservative path, the more steady path, the path without risks. In the late 90s, what would have happened if I would have, instead of deciding that the school systems were messed up, they were training ground generations of kids that were being taught not what they needed to be successful in an ever-changing future, but how to be successful in the past. If I had in the late 90s become a school teacher and worked in a system that's basically impossible to change from within, where would I be today? I would still be at the school counting the days till I get my pension. I'd actually probably be close to retirement right now. I would probably live somewhere in Oregon. And I would be programmed to live the life somebody else has built for me rather than the life that I chose for myself. Instead, what I did, after investing all of that time and money in getting my educational degree, what I did was became an executive trainer, where people pay you to train them. Therefore, they have buy-in and it's more successful. But before I really was successful at that, I had a couple years of side hustles where I was training executives part-time. And at that time, they had this thing called Mad Science, where it was an after-school program where you put on a lab coat and taught kids about the scientific method and then walked them through science experiments, like making cotton candy, changing the state of the crystal and sugars, or, like playing with dry ice, stuff like that, building rockets. That was actually really fun in hindsight. They didn't pay very well, but it paid enough. And that's how I made ends meet. And then I got a job as an administrative assistant, a nice steady job that allowed me time to do that, to take that risk and work on the things I really loved. Well, what if in the early aughts, I hadn't quit that administrative assistant position that had changed into more of a marketing position for software? What if I hadn't not left that let's just admit it, low-paying job that I worked very hard at and learned a lot from, but was at a startup at, startup expectations, around 2000. You know what that was like if you remember. It was like, "We'll give you options." Options are worthless, by the way, unless the company does well. What if I hadn't jumped at the chance to get a mortgage on a home that I didn't think I could afford and rented out rooms to make ends meet to get my first house? You know what I have today because I took those risks? I have a rental business. I have rental properties. And I learned a lot of that in that first house. And I established enough wealth basically to be able to have additional rental properties because I had roommates. I had side hustles painting other people's rentals. I had side hustles cleaning other people's rentals. And in that, I was learning the rental business because I left that steady administrative assistant job that I had to take that first time to be able to do anything. Because let's face it, I had rent to pay. I learned website development and started building website for people. I started doing customized executive coaching programs just as a contractor. And then I transitioned into a public policy career because I realized that freedom was really, 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 really important. And I went on that way for a long time. And I sang in a rock band and we launched CDs that were marginally successful, not successful by standards of, like superstars, but didn't lose money on it. Had some good shows, had some good show up at shows, sold out of CDs, so printed enough to sell out, became a pretty good singer. All because I was willing to take the risk of standing in front of people with a microphone and singing my songs. What would I be like if I had never made any of those decisions? I'd still be that bored teacher, waiting for my pension, waiting for retirement, complaining about not making enough money because teachers are never paid enough money. Somewhere in the back hills of Oregon. Probably the very, very remote back hills of Oregon, based on the topic I was teaching, I was trained to teach. And what if in 2016 I had just stayed the course on my public policy career? It was secure income by then. It was close to six figures, like a couple thousand away. We'll just put it that way, of six figures. What if I had just stayed there and done my best to raise money as a nonprofit president? And further, a mission I knew was falling flat. What would that have been like? What if I hadn't started this podcast in 2016? What if I hadn't started selling the beans I roasted that everybody who came over and had coffee here really liked? What if I had not made the leap out into the life I live now? What I had in place by then were rentals, which added some stability for that leap. But I was below the poverty line in 2016 for sure for income. I was running a newspaper. What if I hadn't tried that? That newspaper ultimately went out of business. But I learned a whole bunch about layout and advertisement sales and writing and finding local stories, which has helped immensely in my podcast. What if I hadn't done the egg sale business and then decided the egg sale business wasn't for me? You know what really kept me afloat that year was that I was still doing executive facilitation for somebody for, once every 3 months or so. And that one executive facilitation paid for 3 months of expenses. And it took about a week and a half of time. Every time I did one of those, like the podcast didn't go out that week because I was 110% in on that executive facilitation and story coaching. And you know what? That's when the speaking engagements went from public policy to this, to homesteading. That's when I started helping some people build websites. I'd always done websites now and then. That's when a lot of people really wanted websites. What would have happened? What if I was still that school teacher just sitting there getting my insurance for my health? Or in 2017, what if I hadn't taken my last $400? Jumped in the car with Mike, permaculture Tennessee guy, Tennessee permaculture, I said that the wrong way. And gone down to Jack Spirko's to present how to roast coffee. Hollow roast would not be what they were today had I not taken my last $400, which was a risk. I could have used that for groceries. I could have used that for, improving the house. I could have used that to pay my mortgage. I took my last $400 and I went to Jack Spirko's fall workshop. And at that workshop, I made the decision, and I was surrounded by the right people to do this, to take hollow roast like beyond a side hustle. And I did a Kickstarter and it was successful. And I got my first commercial roaster. I launched a membership program for the podcast. I still did the occasional facilitation that year. I think that might have been my last year of facilitations. It might have done some in 28. I can't remember. And we had our first chicken processing class. And all that time, I still had the rentals. And what the rentals did for me was the tune of about $250 a month. And then I have a guest cabin here that could bring in another $5 at the time. So it was like $750. Well, you know what? $750 is my mortgage here. I know those of you who just heard that puked a little bit in your mouth, but that's what inflation has done to you. That's all I can say. And if I hadn't taken that risk, none of anything we're doing today would be happening. I would still just be recording a podcast frantically once a week while trying to do anything to get money in the door. Now what I do is follow my passion, build community, build network, empower other people to do what I'm doing, and I get paid for it. What if in 2018 I hadn't taken a leap of faith and had my first Living Free in Tennessee spring workshop, even though my land wasn't ready for it? Sean Mills came out, like the Tennessee GSD crew exists because we were cleaning up my property for that event. Workshop number 7 is this year. It will be sold out this week if it's not already sold out by the time you're hearing this podcast. Life-changing event for people. What if I hadn't taken a leap of faith and had faith I could sell at least 20 tickets that first year and maybe break even because Jack Spirko was coming? What if in 2019 I hadn't said to the Redneck, hey, you can move in here? The partner in my project, the guy who's probably just walked in and is defrosting after, I think, freezing like a popsicle outside because it's so cold. What if in 2020, when we had all that supply chain disruption, when my revenue was flat at Hollow Roast because we were in shutdowns, what if I hadn't bought the beans? What if in 2021 I hadn't said, hey, you know what? Let's try this event. Let's see what people can teach. We'll call it Self-Reliance Festival. We'll do it at Special Operations Equipment. John, what do you think? What if in 2022 I hadn't gotten a bigger roaster to be able to do more orders on spec? What if in 2023 I hadn't traveled all over the place to speak and met new people and expanded our community? What if I hadn't sold a bunch of coffee? What if I hadn't launched the webinar center? All of these things have taken risk and then doing what it takes to make it work. Some of these things have been more successful than others. Every time it has not been as successful, it's because of me, though. It's because I haven't done the focus and work. Sometimes I've done the work without the focus. Sometimes I've done the focus without the work. Those two things go together. But none of it has been an abject failure. And I've learned a few things along the way. The first thoughts I have on risk taking is that spreadsheets don't lie. Go into risks with open eyes. Know your best and worst case scenario if you can. But if you're spending 6 months figuring that out, you are actually wasting time. You just spent 6 months trying to assess the risk and 6 months not taking it when you knew you wanted to. Or maybe you were trying to talk yourself out of it. That could be. The truth usually falls in the middle of your best and worst when you do the financial models of things. If you're passionate about making something happen, for realsies passionate, like this is really what I love, this is really what I want to do, your risk is actually lower than it will look like when you analyze it. Because The thing that you control is you. And the thing that makes the biggest difference in success and failure is you. Can you still fail? Heck yeah, you can still fail. That's what risk is. But if you don't risk failure, you don't fail forward. You don't have success because you didn't try. And sure, it's more comfortable not to try, but it's better to take the risk and learn. The community and underground networks that I have, those matter the most in success when taking a risk because there's somebody there who can ask you critical questions when you're at the face of assessing it from an outside perspective, not emotionally connected. Be careful who you choose as that person because the naysayers from their sofas who don't know crap about crap are not who you want to talk to. You know who I want to talk to? I want to talk to somebody like Sean Mills from Hack My Homestead because he'll actually take it seriously, ask me critical questions, but he's not going to be like saying it because he's jealous or saying it because he feels like a failure and wants everybody to fail with him. Different kind of people. That's why we have the community we have. But your network is super important when you're taking a risk because your network makes a difference between success and failure sometimes. Because sometimes you just need the right piece of advice, the right person to outsource to, whatever it is, it's in your network. That's why networking groups are so popular in all the industries all over the place because network and relationships are that important. Only your opinion really matters about risk, by the way. When weighing in if you should do or do not do something, even though you may seek counsel from other people, the only opinion that matters about if you take the risk or not is your opinion. That's really it. That's the only thing that matters. Now, if it impacts your family, involves moving, for example, okay, I'll give you that. Like their opinions matter too. But you see what I mean by that, right? Like if you're going to make it work and the family has bought in, you're going to move and you're all going to make it work. Your opinions as the family matter. The family opinions that don't matter to me are my sister or mom who think I shouldn't do it because they don't understand and they don't think it's good. Now, if they say that, I'll hear why, but I will ultimately make my own decision. And I will only hear why because I trust them well enough and they've given me good advice in the past that I know that if their spidey sense is up, I should listen and at least consider it. But in the end, my opinion matters. If I'm going to start a new event or do a new coffee line or, be crazy and start a podcast like I did in 2016. And then the other thing about taking risks is the small decisions you make every day matter the most. What I mean by that is the big decisions that we make, they're important in our lives. And we spend a lot of time agonizing over them. And usually that is time wasted once we've gone beyond some basic assessments. But the little decisions we make every single day have a huge impact on our life. It has a huge impact on the success of the risk that you are taking. If you are taking a risk to start a side hustle and you are disciplined about doing your follow-up and getting things launched and all of that every single day, you're going to do better than somebody who isn't most of the time. It's the little decisions every day that make the biggest difference and that reduce your risk when you take a risk of all things. So then let's talk about making it work. Almost every time you take a risk to do something, it ends up looking different than you thought it would. From backpacking the Appalachian Trail to starting Hollow Roast Coffee to anything else, to deciding we want to raise sheep here. It almost always looks different than we thought. And I'm pretty sure we had thought a lot about sheep before they came on the property. And I'm pretty sure that nothing went the way we thought it was going to go. Nothing. Now we know a lot about sheep. All of that theoretical looking at it stuff we did, no. Financial models were different. Taking care of the sheep was different. The ease of moving fence around was different. Literally, Tactical has had a livestock guardian dog getting out in the ice and snow because sheep in the ice and snow is different. It all looks different. That's why the making it work part is so important. And that's why focus and a commitment to making it work is important. But It's also okay to stop doing things that don't work for whatever reason, because you're the driver of your ship. And if you just decided that you hated raising sheep because sheep aren't fun, then you should just not raise sheep, even though you thought you should have, even though you invested a whole bunch of time and money in it. Stop. I stopped selling eggs. You want to know why? Because I don't like delivering eggs. And the only way I was able to move eggs was by delivering eggs. And delivering eggs sucks. Could I make it better? Sure. I could have a place where I drop off eggs every Monday when I go to choir practice and people pick up the eggs there, and I could do that. For the money? Meh, not worth it. I'd rather throw eggs at my dogs than drive eggs all over the county. If somebody wants to come here and buy eggs, they can totally do it when I have eggs. I'm not going to drive my eggs around. And that's why when I was trying the shotgun approach of side hustles in 2016 and 2017, eggs ultimately fell off the list because I hated driving eggs for $8 to $10 somewhere. That's a lot of time for $8 to $10, of which only a small amount of that's your profit, right? That's not worth it. What was worth it was roasting coffee and shipping it to people. And that's why Hollow Roast is the thing that won that year. Sad truth. Most people think they're not good enough. The ones who succeed don't let that voice keep talking to them. They choose to tell that voice to shut up. I don't think I've talked to anybody who doesn't have a moment of anxiety or a moment of, I don't think I can do this, or I'm not good enough, or what did I get myself into? Some people admit it openly. Some people are less likely to. But everybody I know has had that come up. Some people have it more than others. The people who let that voice fall on deaf ears and do it anyway, they make it work. They focus on the things they can do. And that is the difference between letting yourself drag yourself down and building the thing you want to build. The coolest thing about making it work is it's your world, your rules, and your results. When you are successful, you know it's because you did it. You did it your way. And you built your world. And that is super satisfying. But also, to do that, you have to forgive yourself when you fall short. Because sometimes we fall short. Humans. If you forgive yourself and move on and do it right the next day, that's all that matters. Because it's the small daily decisions that really matter. And the best decision you can make every day is to not let the crap you did yesterday influence today. Today, you make it the best you can make it. That's why I say make it a great week at the end of every podcast, because it's up to you to make it a great week. It's up to you to make it a great day. Sure, sometimes you might not get that done, but tomorrow you make it a great day then. And you do that every day that you can do that. And as you do it more and more, you find out you're better at doing it. And that bitch voice is not there anymore. It's rarely there. So really, when we think about taking that risk and making it work, the true question I have for you is, what do you really want? Are you talking about your latest unstarted business idea with worry and anxiety to have something to talk to people about? Or do you really want to do it? Do you want to talk about it? Or do you want to do it? Do you want to have success? Or do you want to have a story about what it could have been if you would have just started it? But that was 15 years ago now. What do you really want? If you like the show and want to support the work we're doing here, you can do it in two ways. One, get your coffee at Hollow Roast. Two, consider becoming a member. Head over to livingfreeintennessee.com to find out more. With that, guys, go out